Shalom.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Shalom, everybody. Today we'll start the class, the subject of learning Torah and praying on Shabbat. We're not going to go into the nusach so much, like we did with the weekday, but just the ideas of why the prayers are different on Shabbat, and actually, Rabbi Melamed decided to start with Torah study. So we all know, I hope, the story of Lag BaOmer, of how it came to be. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son were hiding in a cave after they first hid in the synagogue, and they were worried that maybe the Roman authorities will torture the wife and mother and reveal the place of where they were hiding, which continued even until the 20th century. This horrible idea that the government can oppress somebody by pressing on their family and getting information. So after being in the cave for 12 years, um, the the prophet Elijah came to the entrance of the cave and said to them that the person that was persecuting them is dead, and it's now time for them to come out. And when they came out, everywhere where they looked, because they couldn't believe that people could do mundane things as work and sowing and harvesting, everywhere they looked, they caused disaster and fire and maybe even killing people. And so a heavenly voice came out as saying, you came out of the cave to destroy my world, go back into the cave. And then a year later, after what they figured is just like the time in Gehinnom, they came out, and then every time that Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, would look at places and destroy them, Rabbi Shimon would heal them. But this philosophy of Rabbi Shimon carried over to this conversation about learning on Shabbat, and so the Gemara in Brachos, which is shared on the screen if everybody can see it, says the following. Tanu Rabbanan. So it seems like it was just a question asked in the Beit Midrash. V'asafta deganecha, that you should gather the grain. Matalmud Lamar, how can we reconcile it with the other verse which says that this Torah shall not depart from your mouth? Uh, could it be that this is such a contradiction? So Rabbi Ishmael says, "Asafta de ganecha hanheg behem minhag derech eretz," which means when you have to collect the harvest, and when you have to learn Torah during the time, for example, the long winter days when nothing is happening in the field and it's just growing slowly, especially in the Middle East. I'm not sure. Here in Canada, we have sometimes two harvests, one in October and one in May or June. But about the Middle East, Vasafta de Ganecha means that you should learn Torah, but you should also gather the grain because that's what Hashem wanted. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai argued and says that's not possible. If Shar Adam Choresh B'Shat Charisha, that a person will be busy plowing and sowing and harvesting and then threshing and winnowing and all that other stuff. Torah matehel. What will we do with the Torah? So his explanation is when the Torah is being kept and learned, and the mitzvahs are being kept, then the people of Israel enjoy the work being done by other people. And these are prophecies for the end times from Isaiah. But when the people of Israel do not do Hashem's will, they have to actually do all these things. So his basic understanding is that in the end times, there will be a time when we only learn Torah and we don't have to even go to work even for 1 minute, which is an incredible idea, but unfortunately, it's not realistic for our time. So therefore, in the laws of Shabbat, the rabbis in the Talmud, in a different place, Shabbat and Yom are discussed what is the proper balance between Torah study and working. Obviously, we're not allowed to work on Shabbat, so is Shabbat the day where we're supposed to fulfill this other way of just studying Torah? And so they have a different conclusion, and this is how Rabbi Melamed puts it. It is a mitzvah to study a great deal of Torah on Shabbat. The sages stated Shabbat and Yom Tov were given solely to study Torah on them. This is in the Yerushalmi of Shabbat, not in the Bavli. The sages also stated the Torah said to Hashem, Master of the universe, when the Jews enter the land, this one will run to his vineyard and the other one to his field. What will become of me? Exactly the same question that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asked, Torah mateheh alea. God responded, I have a partner with whom I will pair you. Its name is Shabbat, on which they do not work and thus can engross themselves in you. So according to this explanation of the tour and of the Talmud Yerushalmi, it seems like the whole Shabbat, all 25 hours, we should be learning Torah. But again, that's not possible either because we already learned about the oneg of Shabbat and the kavod of Shabbat, of honoring Shabbat with good food and with special food and with wine and challah, etc., etc. So this is sort of the compromise. Sages also stated, God said to Israel, my children, did I not write to you in my Torah, let not this book of the Torah cease from your mouths, but recite it day and night? And actually, that's in Joshua, not in the 5 books of Moses. Even though you labor for 6 days, you shall dedicate Shabbat to Torah alone. Based on this, the sages advise people to always rise early and study on Shabbat, go to shul and to the Beit Midrash, read the Torah and Haftarah, and then go home and eat and drink, thus fulfilling the verse, go eat your bread in gladness and drink your wine in joy, which is in Kohelet. The surprise for me was that they quoted from Kohelet instead of from Nehemiah. We don't call Nehemiah a prophet, but he lived just at the beginning of the second temple, and he actually said to people to go and eat and drink on Yom Kippur after the service was over, so before the nightfall. And so I was sure that they were going to quote that verse, which is even more amazing about how we do have to honor Shabbat and Yom Tov with food. The sages tell us that we must divide our time on Shabbat. Half of it should be spent studying Torah in the Beit Midrash, and half should be spent enjoying Shabbat through food, drink, and sleep. That's in the Gemara Pesachim. And they talk also about Yom Tov. The only exception for that Yom Tov is Shavuot, where they argue if it should be half and half or more than half for Torah study. Some maintain that it is only on Yom Tov that the division is meant to be even, but that on Shabbat, which is designated for Torah study, one should dedicate more than half of one's time to Torah study. So this is not really practical in the winter. In the summer, especially with daylight saving time, it looks like it would be even better and add a few more hours. So, however, most poskim maintain that on Shabbat, too, one should divide the time evenly, with half one's time spent on Torah and half on physical pleasures. It would seem then that the obligation is to dedicate about 12.5 hours to Torah study, since Shabbat and its Tosefet last approximately 25 hours. However, in practice, it would seem that we can be lenient and leave out the calculation, the 7 hours one needs to sleep each night. So now we're left with 18 hours. There are then 18 hours remaining. Of these, one should dedicate 9 hours to Torah and 9 hours to enjoying Shabbat with food, drink, and pleasure of extra sleep. Although Torah study is the primary spiritual component of Shabbat, according to a number of poskim, one may be lenient and include in these 9 hours of Torah the time spent in prayer, on condition that the prayer service is not too drawn out. So in tomorrow's class, we'll discuss actually what the additions are on Shabbat, especially the Shabbat morning, where we do also learn the Torah and read the Haftarah. And so that's why this calculation is not 100% 50-50, but rather it's based on everybody's ability at their own level. most people, and he actually concludes this part with Halacha, with the idea that even the Talmidei Yeshivot, even the people who are single and are studying in Yeshiva, should not learn on Shabbat things that will cause them to be stressed out that they don't know the answer. We learned this a while ago when we learned the halachot of tefillah, that a person should not be asking or answering a halachic question before davening Shemona Esrei, because it will distract them from concentrating on Shemona Esrei. And so the same idea is the Torah learning on Shabbat should be lighter stuff. It should be, agadot, should be halachot that are already very clear without machloket. Should be just reading the parsha and finding new ideas, but God forbid not to write them down on Shabbat. So those are the parameters that should be discussed further in this chapter about learning Torah on Shabbat. And we'll stop here.